Hello everyone! I'm really happy to be part of JS Fwdays again this year. Now JS Fwdays is the biggest annual JS conference in Ukraine, so of course, I will be talking about CSS. Specifically, I want to share about things that used to require JavaScript to do, but now can be done more simplistically with just CSS. So let's go. A quick introduction. My name is Hui Jing, and I'm simple enough that these emojis you see on the screen paint a fairly comprehensive picture of who I am as a person. Now, I happen to be Chinese, and if you're unfamiliar with Chinese names, our family names come first, followed by our first names. And I'm also currently a developer, front-end developer at Shopify, because, you know, we all need to pay the bills. Now, half an hour is not a very long time, and I don't expect everyone to just immediately pick up everything that I covered today. Instead, see of this as more of an informative talk where I'm just letting you know that these things exist. And if you ever need to use them yourself, then you can take your own time to understand how they work, understand them at a deeper level, and apply them to your specific use case. So let's go. These are the things that I'm going to be talking about today. Hopefully we can cover them all in half an hour. So let's start off with responsive topography. Now, to me, the web is fun, and you might disagree, but I think the web is fun because you cannot control the environment via which your audience views your creations. So for textual content on the web, the key concern is legibility and readability of the text. Now, there have been a number of techniques that have been developed over the years since, responsive design became a thing. And we've had more and more new CSS properties become available. So these responsive text techniques have been refined over the years. So let's take a look at some examples in the browser. So here, I've got a couple options. I want to introduce the first one, which arguably could be the most basic one, but you can also say it's the most granular control. How should we put this? Okay, if you look here, it's fairly straightforward. It just makes use of media queries. You define the different breakpoints where you want your text to, adjust in size, and, the text just adjusts accordingly. So it is basic, but you also have a lot of control. You can control exactly when you want your text to be, how big or small. Now, a technique that came up around 2015, it was, I would say, pioneered by Mike Rithmuller. Now, he came up with this function that made use of the CSS Calc function used in combination with viewport units. Now, viewport units are a CSS size unit that's dependent on the size of the viewport. So in that sense, it makes your font size kind of grow and shrink with the viewport. It's a very interesting concept, but there's also the issue that you may end up having text sizes too large or too small. And that's where Mike came up with this kind of a function. With the help of media queries, you can introduce a minimum and a maximum cap so that you can prevent your text from getting too big or small, and yet have it, scale in between widths that, again, you define. So I know this function looks slightly complicated, but the thinking behind it is that you want to have a scalable font with a max and minimum cap. So that's where the media queries come in. For a detailed, in-depth explanation on how this formula actually works, I highly suggest you read Mike's article. I've linked to it. You can check all the links at the end of this presentation. But if you look at the numbers plugged in here, right, I have in this example, I'm doing it on my H1. My max size is going to be 48, minimum size is going to be 24. And the width in which this responsive text operates is, I arbitrarily decided this, but between 400 and 800, right? And if you look at the numbers, they're all related. So again, the explanation is pretty long, pretty in-depth, so please read the article. Now, what we have recently is a lot of CSS math functions got supported by the major browsers. And so one of these functions is the clamp function. Now, it looks like the calc function. So all the CSS functions look pretty similar. It's like parentheses, and then you have parameters that you put in there. The clamp function allows us to pick a value within a range between a defined minimum and a maximum. So this sounds very similar to Mike's formula that I talked about earlier. So this particular function takes in 3 parameters. The first one is the minimum size, the next one is the preferred size, and the last one is the maximum value. So this function is particularly useful if your preferred value is dependent on something that you don't really control directly. So in this case, if you use viewport units, right, it's a scale. It's not a defined discrete value. The minimum and max caps save you from having font sizes that end up being too large and too small. So the concept is almost exactly the same as option 2, but the syntax is so much more simplified. There's one thing to note: if you want to use viewport units or you want to limit your text sizes with math functions, that you do have to check. You have to check what happens when you zoom, because it's a WCAG failure if your text cannot zoom up to 200%. So it might happen if you use viewport units. It's not a confirmed issue. So testing is not difficult. You just, zoom in. You can see that, your browser tells you, oh, that's how much you've zoomed. But just a quick test to make sure that your font size can actually be zoomed to 200% of the original, just for a WCAG requirement. The support for the clamp function is not too bad, about 91%. Most major browsers have it. I mean, IE11 is going to be retired this year, so it's worth a try if you need to build something with responsive topography moving forward. Next thing I want to talk about is something called scroll snap. So the CSS for scroll snap has been around for quite a number of years, but because the specification has gone through a number of modifications, the properties have changed somewhat. The properties we have today are, I guess, quite different from the first version. So today, the main properties are scroll snap type for the container and scroll snap align for the child element, which needs to do the snapping. So again, let's look at this in the browser. Got a demo here. This is a kind of a horizontal layout. I'm not sure if the mic can pick up what I'm clicking. I'm clicking once and it kind of like just zooms over. I think, yeah. The keyboard sounds a bit louder. So like one tap, it hits to the next slide. So this happens when scroll snap type is set to mandatory. Scroll snap type can take 2 different keywords, mandatory and proximity. So I'm going to change this to a vertical layout just because I can. So again, scroll snap is still applied. So both indicates the axis. So I put both because I wanted to show you both directions. So now it's a vertical demo. So like I mentioned, I'm really hoping that the mic picks up this, but I'm only tapping on my keyboard once and it's snapping. So that's what mandatory does. It defines a very strict snap point. If I change this to the other keyword value, which is proximity, the browser becomes a lot more loose with how the snapping takes place. So 2, 3, 4, snap. 1, 2, 3, 4, snap. So it's less defined. Like you have to hit a certain threshold before the snapping happens. I think this differs between browsers, but it's generally about within a few hundred pixels of when your user stops scrolling, then it will just snap to a point. So you do have some flexibility in how you want this scroll snapping to behave. And this is all CSS only. So if you do need to build a UI like this, instead of going for a JavaScript library, just maybe try the CSS solution first, because there's really not a lot of code going on here, right? So let's look at support. Even better than the clamp function. I mean, if you had to support IE11, I bet you the old syntax still works. So 94% of browsers do support CSS scroll snap. Put that in one of your options if you need to build this in the future. Next, let's talk about sticky elements. Now, sticky elements is a UI pattern that I encounter fairly often these days. It's a pretty useful UI pattern. I do still remember the days before position sticky was widely supported. And if we wanted to do anything sticky, we'd have to use JavaScript to calculate the position of where the element needed to be. It all felt very expensive and too much effort just to make something stick to a particular location on the page when you're scrolling. So right now, today, support for position sticky, pretty solid. Again, I'm sorry if you have to support IE 11, but for the most part, pretty good, pretty good. 96% of modern browsers support sticky elements. So let's look at some demos. Now, the thing with position sticky I see these days is not so much that the CSS doesn't work. Rather, a lot of people run into issues when they're trying to use position sticky. And I feel this is due to a slight knowledge gap between how position sticky actually works. So I'll try to explain it. With this example, I've got a couple of blue boxes. I have this green box that's my quote-unquote sticky candidate. So a sticky position box is like a hybrid between a relatively positioned box and a fixed position box. And in order for position sticky to actually work, you not only have to put position sticky on the box, you also have to put something called an offset value, which in my case, I'm using top. So an offset value is anything top, bottom, left, or right. It has to have a value. This is like an indication to the browser, like, please stick this box at this position, at this offset position. So I've put top 1em. So as I scroll, it's gonna stick to like 1em from the edge of the container. So I have a wrapper, and it's gonna stick 1em. I can change this value. I can change it to 0. It'll stick nicely to the top. Let's do horizontal. Horizontal works too. Flex none. Let's do right. And yeah, so same concept, right? It's sticky. Now the thing with, I'm just gonna refresh this. The thing with sticky is I think most people end up having to debug. It's like, my sticky element is not sticking. Why is that? I would say there are many different issues, but a very common one that I see is that the element is actually sticking. It's just that the container has scrolled out of view. So this is easier to show rather than just say. So I'm gonna give the wrapper around my boxes a height. I'm just arbitrarily doing 600, and let's give it a border so we can see border 1px solid. Okay. Okay, so this is the wrapper, and clearly you have way too much content. It has already overflowed. So, like, if you think about it, if I'm scrolling the larger parent, and your container has rolled out of view, nothing is gonna stick, and this doesn't mean that sticky's not working, because let me show you this. Let's try 1000. So 1000, my wrapper is now like bigger than where sticky my green box is supposed to be. So scroll, stick. So it actually does stick. Now the problem is that it has stuck, and yet my container, my wrapper, is scrolling out of view. So it ends up not looking like it doesn't stick. But the thing about position sticky, think about how position absolute or position relative works, right? It's child with its direct parent. That's the interaction. So if you did want it to stick to the outermost container, your markup's gonna have to do something. Or you'd have to explicitly say, make the position relative on the parent specific to that sticky element. So, okay, admittedly, I don't think this was the best explanation, but I also wrote a bit about positioning on my blog before, and in there, I have linked to several different articles written by different authors that explain sticky positioning. Because I think everyone understands this differently. I understand I understood it in my own way, so I think everyone explains it slightly differently. So if what I said today doesn't make sense to you, just try reading a different explanation until you find the one that's suddenly like, oh, I get it now. So I think that's a good way to do it. Moving on, let's talk about Masonry Layout. Now, this next one I'm talking here, Masonry, it's only supported in Firefox for now, but you can enable it. It's also behind a flag, so you gotta enable it using like these instructions I have here. You know, do the about config thing, set this masonry value to true. Now, masonry originally it was this JavaScript layout library created by David Asandro back in 2009. So it's like more than 10 years old. It's really great. It's a layout where items are like tiled very neatly, based on the vertical space available. So I don't know if you folks use Tumblr, but a lot of Tumblr themes like this layout because the content is different types and different sizes. Pinterest does this. I think you can Google like Pinterest style layout, and most likely it's masonry, right? So it's a very popular layout style, popular among designers, developers. So this masonry library is still well used today, right? Now, the CSS working group seriously discussed whether or not to include masonry into like make it a CSS thing. And you know, after discussions, the editor's draft of grid level 3 does specify how this can be done natively with CSS. So again, it's pretty early days. That's why it's behind a flag for now. But you know, do try it out. So let's look at some demos, right? Even without CSS Masonry, like today, CSS Masonry not very well supported at all. Without CSS Masonry, without the Masonry JavaScript library, what can we do? We have this CSS property called like column, which is the part of the multi-call spec that can kind of do something like Masonry. Oh, but it has quite a lot of limitations. Because at the end of the day, multi-call is more for things. I feel multi-call is more for like text layout, like lines and lines of inline text, and it flows like a newspaper, right? Flows up. So if you look at the order, I've numbered my elements in order in numbers, right? It's 1, 2, 3, 4. So like think a newspaper column layout, right? You read, and then the next line goes all the way up. So I guess if you wanted to do something like this, but for something different, like a gallery display or whatever, and if the order of your items was important, for the most part, I would say most scenarios would like the more important stuff to come up first, which is like come up top. So if you were doing multi-call, it might not work that well. Also, the syntax support in multi-call is not very, how should I put it? It's not very standardized in browsers yet because again, the spec hasn't really stabilized. So there's this concept of, you know, oh, I want to span my element across columns. You can do that. In theory, you should be able to control the columns. Right now, we only have support for all, and if you can see, the rendering is a bit iffy. I mean, because breaking up content in and of itself is kind of a complicated issue. So I would say, let's give it a scale, right? Out of 10, CSS Masonry Layout with multi-call, 5-ish? Not like doable, but not great. So let's cue the actual CSS Masonry layout, right? So CSS Masonry builds on top of browser's grid capabilities, and the syntax is very similar to how we would do subgrid, which is part of grid level 2. The value of Masonry, which is a keyword value, you apply it either to grid template columns or grid template rows. So it's display grid, and then Masonry becomes like a sizing keyword. So for this particular layout you're looking at now, it's like a horizontal style layout. So if you look at the values, grid template rows, I've defined the row heights there, arbitrarily 20 vmin, and I've let the columns be free to behave like freely to be masoned. So again, the order, the number, if you look at the numbering here, you'd see that the numbering is a bit off. That's because all my elements here are of different sizes. And CSS Masonry like kind of tells the browser like, okay, you know the size of all these elements. You arrange them in a way that it like fits together nicely, like in a masonry layout. So the browser does a bit of its reshuffling, and so like 4 ends up at the bottom because it's like wider, something like that. And the thing about Masonry when you do it with CSS Grid is that you kind of resolve the whole spanning issue, because the rendering engine for Grid I think is pretty solid. So I could span across columns. It looks so much better than the multi-col edition. Of course, there's still a bit of a gap here. So it works vertically as well. So this is the vertical style. If you look at the CSS values, now my column sizes I've defined. I'm like, okay, go just masonry all the rows. And it kind of looks really nice. It tiles neatly. So with Flexbox and with Grid, one of the most useful things I personally feel is the box alignment properties made it so much easier to align content. Masonry also it does all the same things as the existing box alignment properties, and it also introduces Masonry specific alignment properties. So the property name becomes align tracks and justify tracks. Align for along the block direction, justify for along the inline direction. Example. Let me do this. I'm gonna make the container super long. So like if you have like a lot of space versus content, we can kind of use the align tracks property to align your content within the container. So the behavior, if you've used box alignment before, it's like very similar, just additional keywords for you to do these adjustments. And again, it's behind a flag, and currently the working group is looking for feedback on the implementation, because there are a lot of aspects to consider before it's production ready. So if you are using Firefox, this feature, behind a flag, enable it, try it out for yourself. If you have any feedback, you can raise it back to the CSS working group. I'm pretty sure they'll be happy to hear more input from people who actually use CSS, this CSS. Okay, lastly, this is totally a hot topic, because I don't know if you subscribe to like front-end newsletters or you follow a lot of like developer advocates on Twitter. This is like the thing that a lot of people have been talking about like past couple of weeks. Container queries. The concept behind container queries has been around for quite a while. I would say ever since responsive design became the norm. I think people wanted to be able to design your individual components and let them display differently based on the size of its parent. But what we can only do now is like, oh, you can resize based on the overall viewport size, right? You can change, you can use meter queries, but you can't, it's not as fine-grained control as most people would like. And now personally, I am not a browser engineer, don't get me wrong. I do have enough understanding of how the browsers have to do layout to know that implementing the logic for container queries, it's not a trivial affair. I think that's the reason why it took so long in terms of calculations, like how to render all these element sizes. So the idea of containment, right? The isolation of a subtree from the rest of the document. This idea has been floated around since 2017, because that was when the first public working draft for the containment module was published. So there were thoughts on like, can we let developers have access to this, I would say this feature, right? Now the work for containment and container queries really picked up at the end of 2020. It was championed by Miriam Suzanne. She's done so much work on the specification. She's a huge reason why we have a version of container queries to play with in Chrome Canary right now. So only supported in Chrome Canary. Again, it's behind a feature flag, so you'll have to go through these instructions to enable it. Again, it's Chrome Canary, so it doesn't work on Firefox. If you try to open this browser on this browser, I'm going to show you a message that I'm sorry, you need a browser that supports container. So let's switch browsers, right? Okay. This is Chrome Canary. As you can see, it looks different because container queries actually work here. Now, there are two parts in getting container queries to work. The first is the contain property. So, okay, look, in this demo, I have two containers that have one card inside. I've They have all the same class names, except the one on the left is not contained, class name, not contained here, and the one on the right has contained. So it's almost exactly the same properties and values, except that the one on the right has this very key contain property. So the contain property is applied to the container whose size will serve as the basis for the query. So this goes on to the parent, on the parent element. So contain is meant to indicate which containment rules apply to the element and the stuff within it. And container queries will only apply to elements that have the contain property. And the contain property itself, it can take in multiple keywords. The order of the keywords don't matter, but it kind of like is the scope of what you want contained. So for this to work, because I'm changing styles, layout and the size, that's what I've defined for my contain property for now. So the container queries, if you look at the syntax, what's going on? If you look at the syntax for container queries, it's exactly the same as media queries, right? Except that the keyword is different. It's @container. Syntax is the same. So I've got a couple of container queries. One kicks in at 18M, one kicks in when the container is 30M. So a lot of style differences. So right now you're looking at the widest version, this pink version. But if I change the size of my parent, boom, different layout. Boom, different layout. And okay, the one on the left nothing happens to the one on the left because there's no contain property on it. So they're exactly the same class. But again, it doesn't hit it because again, it's not a container, it's not container queried. And I think this is such an exciting development because the fact that we can control the styling of elements based on the size of its parent versus like the size of the entire viewport, it gives us so many more design options. It gives us so much more flexibility when you want to design different components on our page. So I'm not surprised that many people are talking about this. This has been highly coveted for a long time. So again, a reminder to everyone, this is only supported in Chrome Canary for now. But again, I highly encourage everyone, get a copy of Chrome Canary if you don't have it. Enable the flag and try it out because like there's so many options, and I think it helps for people to, implement it and then share it with the world just to give people more ideas. Now, personally, as a self-proclaimed CSS lover, I must say that the thing that draws me most to CSS is the fact that there is no one right way to do things, right? A lot of the demos that I showed had multiple options that could do very similar things. And there's no better or worse way, it's just a different way. And CSS is very flexible. It's the flexibility of CSS that I love so much because I started out very early on in my career. I worked at an agency. We did a lot of CMS work. There were a lot of situations that ended up when a lot of things you couldn't control, right? I can't control the markup, for example. But it's fine. It's fine because with CSS, there's a very high chance that you can use a certain combination of CSS properties to work around the limitations you have as a front-end developer. So that's really what I like about CSS. And there are so many exciting developments in CSS these days. And what these do is that it doesn't make the old techniques obsolete. I mean, some old techniques, yes, you don't have to use them anymore, but the old properties are still available. So if each property is a tool, we're just getting more and more tools to work with, which means we can do more things. We're more powerful now. And we, as front-end developers, have even more tools with which to style the web. So right now, if none of these things I talked about are relevant to you, it's fine. It doesn't matter. It's not going to go away. It's just going to be sitting in the browser waiting for you to use it. So even if you don't use the latest and greatest right now, I do hope that you keep this concept in mind and think like, oh, CSS can do a lot of things now. And when you do have to build a certain something, maybe try the CSS option first before going for a JavaScript library. So these are the resources that I want to share with all of you. My slides are online, the URLs at the bottom. And again, thank you so much for having me and have a great rest of the conference.
Hello, hi. Hi.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Hui Jing. It was a wonderful presentation. And we've got a few questions from chat, but I also got some of my own, and I'll be the person who asked them. So
Cool.
if you listeners want to ask questions to Chen, just type them into Discord, and I'll pick them up. So, uh, the the biggest like new things for me was this masonry layout. I've never done it, so I've never even like looked into libraries that are available to do such thing. And I noticed something that when you have these columns or rows or whatever, the browser tries to automatically pick up like small or large boxes to get them aligned neatly. But in that case, the ordering of the boxes sometimes kind of misses. So you have like 1, 2, 3, and then instead of 4 under 1, I would get 5 because 4 is too big and it's suited better under 2. Is there a way to control it somehow, to force the ordering? I don't care much about like the overall like neatness and the height of the layout, and instead I'm actually caring more about the ordering, but I don't care about like the individual positions of the items.
That's a very good question. You know, for masonry specifically, I'll have to check with you. But the thing about masonry that it was built on top of grid, and the basic grid, there is an option to called grid auto flow. So it's one of the properties
I see.
where
I see.
and 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 the values for this particular property, there's a like a how should we put a packing value. So the default is the the default is like don't mess up the order, and then the one that forces everything into available space is called dense. So you can control it for like the most basic level of grid, but with masonry, the browser does the packing thing automatically. So
I see.
I think I think the browsers do know when to pack it or not. Now, what keyword is available to us? I will have to check that, but I'm very sure it must exist because the algorithm is an existing algorithm already. I think it's whether they expose a specific property to let us like unpack it, because the point of masonry is to pack. So I'm not sure if they
Yeah.
expose the unpacking, but that's a very good question. I will have to check that, and I'll probably tweet out the answer when I get it.
Yes, I see. That's the whole example looked really cool. By the way, I liked how easy it was. Container queries. It is indeed very powerful thing. I recognize now that we often often go CSS and JavaScript route for that. So right now, like we would do like, if my container is a certain size, I would apply this CSS. Otherwise, I would apply the CSS. And is it based on size only, or can I apply it based on like any given types of properties at this point? Like for
I
example, if my container, I don't know, is red, or if it's blue or whatever.
so I believe that should be available, but I don't think the browsers have implemented it yet. So during the talk, I mentioned this property called contain. So the contain property is something that was much earlier than the query part of it, even though the query part is the most popular one. The idea of the contain property originally was for rendering optimization. So the available, I would say, scopes for containment does include paint and does include it was paint, size. So there were 4 of them. So I'm very sure that the full, like, because now it's like a trial a prototype version in Chrome Canary, I'm pretty sure that the queries we use for media queries should be available to container queries once the browsers can implement that. Because the concept should be the same. But I don't think we can. I don't think it's in the browser yet.
So, yeah. And moving back to sticky elements, I do use position sticky all the time. It's like the most popular position property these days. It used to be like relative and absolute. Today it's like either sticky or just whatever. All right. And sometimes I want to know if my element, as it scrolls up, if it's on its position or not. Is there a way in CSS to define properties that would say, like, if I'm already stuck at the top, I want to be smaller. If I'm not stuck, I want to be larger, because these days we still use JavaScript for that.
For that, I don't think it's possible.
It would be nice to have like something similar to media query or something. Just I'm stuck. I'm sticking right now, or I'm not sticking right now. That would be interesting idea to add to CSS.
Yeah, that use case is definitely very useful. But I think because it involves the dynamic computation of height, we'll probably have to tap into JavaScript to do that.
Yeah. Overall, like when you look at the code bases these days, and you notice that people overuse JavaScript for CSS, what's the best way to approach the situation right now? Like, we know that CSS can do a lot more than it could do, say, 5 years ago. But first of all, there is a lack of, I don't know, general knowledge and stuff. And second of all, if we want to migrate to more CSS-based layouts, how to approach this? It's sometimes like it seems daunting because, you know, with JavaScript we start to spreading all this if-elses everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. So in a way, it's like it's kind of like a technical debt payback. So I think it also depends on the size of the project. Like if it's your own project, I think it's fairly okay because like you kind of know where everything is. I think the problem comes when it's a larger project with a larger team. For things like that, I think you really have to like dedicate the time to, first of all, kind of identify all the places where the JavaScript is, where the relevant JavaScript is, like kind of do an audit. And then that's for the actual cleanup. So there are two parts to it, right? There's the part where you replicate the exact same functionality, but with CSS. You got to make sure that's working. And then the next part is the replacing part. So I think if you split it up to that, I think I personally suggest doing the function replication first. Why is that? Because this will flag out. First of all, you'll be forced to identify like all the functionality you actually needed. So this, in a way, this also helps with the cleanup because JavaScript libraries are pretty general for the most part. Like they can do a number of things, and this is a common scenario is that we only need it to do one thing, but we import the entire library. So sometimes especially if you're new to the code base, you're like, can I replace this? Like, can I take away this library? Is it used anywhere else? So this is an opportunity for you to kind of audit, like, what exactly am I using from this library and what components are being touched? So when you're trying to rebuild the JavaScript component using CSS, you have an opportunity to kind of clean up your code. So I feel that even if you realize that the CSS solution is, it's incomplete, you get a chance to audit the JavaScript bit a bit. So I think there's a benefit there in the first place. So let's say, great, I managed to replicate the CSS functionality. Then that's the part where I would suggest having a nice IDE with an excellent search function to kind of like make sure you catch all the spots where that component is used.
Yeah.
So,
the bane of our existence is CSS
break it
class.
down.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true also. Yeah.
Yeah, the hardest part is like getting the classes that are composed into of several strings. That's what I found, because
Yeah.
you know, you are not looking for the full class name. You are something that's sometimes it's dynamic and stuff. So yeah, finding all the places where this particular piece of CSS is used is really, really hard.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Chen, that were all questions that we have for now. And I'd like to thank you for the wonderful presentation once again. It was really, really helpful, very, very inspiring, because, you know, you look at stuff that CSS was able to do 5 years ago, and you kind of remember it. And I remember all the big strides when it was moving faster. And it seems like it's moving faster again. And it's exciting times. Thank you for your
Thank you so
time,
much for having
and
me. Yep.
enjoy the rest of your day.